welcome to the romance track here at Continual. I'm your host, Gail Z Martin and Morgan Brice, and spring is in the air. We are talking about love and romance, why we like it, why we read it, why we write it, all that good stuff. But before we launch into that, let's let our panelists introduce themselves, starting with Shaila.
Hi, I'm Shaila Patel, and I write young adult paranormal romance, also contemporary romance. My latest short story is actually not spring-based, unfortunately. It was actually set in the fall, but it's called Love on Main. And it's an anthology of short stories and all that kind of take place small town America. It was my first foray into contemporary, but I have I'm working on other stuff right now in that kind of YA romantic suspense thriller kind of genre. So it was neat. My paranormal was actually Soulmated. That was actually what most people know me from. And that's a teen paranormal romance. Yeah, that's me.
Cool. Nina?
Oh, okay. Well, hello. I'm Nina Crespo. I write stories that are from sizzling to small town sexy. And my last two stories, I do believe were in the spring. I'm working on a new story, so everything just kind of combines after a while. I think people can identify with that. But my last book was called The Cowgirls Surprise Match. And that released in February with Harlequin Special Edition. Nice wedding story, surprise engagement type situation. And then I have another book coming up in actually a few weeks now, I think about it. And it's called An Officer and a Fortune. And it's actually part of a multi-author continuity series that's been going on a while for Harlequin called The Fortunes of Texas. And this book is part of the Fortunes of Texas, the Hotel Fortunes miniseries. So that's
nice. Amy?
Let's see. I'm Amy Lane, and I write, well,
everything.
Yes. I write many subgenres: sci-fi, fantasy, urban fantasy, mystery suspense has been my jam lately. And the one I released today I do not have a book. I don't have it's coming in sometime this week, but it's called The Mastermind, and it's classified action adventure. And for everybody who liked Ocean's 11 and Leverage and those thief movies, those Robin Hood movies, it's like that, but they're all gay and they're all hot.
Well, of course.
Yeah, thank you. And so it's
Ocean's 11.
Yeah, it's like Ocean's 11. There's going to be 7 of them. The first one is the mastermind, and then we've got the muscle, and then we've got the driver, and then we're going to have the hacker, and we're going to go down the line to all the members of the crew, right? And the first one is actually released, or the part of the action happens back in Rome at the beginning of summer, and then the bulk of the action happens modern day in Chicago in spring, which is fun because if you've ever been to Chicago in the spring, that means anything from snow to 85 degrees in the same day.
Yeah.
True. Victoria Sue? Victoria Sue?
Oh, sorry. I'm listening to my dog chewing furiously down here and hoping nobody can hear him. Yeah, Victoria Sue, I came to the realization this last year that I am a paranormal author. I don't do contemporary. I tried and failed miserably, so I'm kind of scooting that to the side. But my paranormal ranges from English knights being made immortal and fighting in current day New York to guys having babies. And there might be an odd serial killer that kind of, wedges his way in there, and an odd wizard or some DNA strange happenings. But yeah, mainly paranormal, and I'm happy with that. So that's me.
Gini?
Hi, I'm Gini Koch. I write everything. I'm best known for the Alien Catherine Kitty Cat series for DAW, which is science fiction with a lot of action, romance, and humor. And I tend to write romance and everything. So you can list the Alien series as science fiction romance. And the first book does start at the end of spring, start of summer in Arizona. And I was not smart enough to bring any books to hold up. Book 16 came out far too long ago, and I'm still working on book 17, Aliens Like Us, on the rewrite. But I have other things coming out. I write under 7 pen names, so I have a lot of anthologies coming out with me writing as Anita Ensall, all of which have romance in them, and they're set in the far future in the asteroid belt. So that's all coming, different ones, including I've got a story in The Reinvented Heart, which is taking different, like, what will romance and love be in the future. So they wanted a lot of, guessing up there. And so my main couple in that are 2 elderly ladies who are the last 2 surviving of a 7-person poly marriage, and they're traveling to the belt for one last fling. So that's coming out later this year.
Cool. Tere?
Oh, it's me. Hi, I'm Tere Michaels. I write mostly contemporary, although my last release was book 3 of my dystopian series, which came out in February. I'm writing book 4 now. This being romance in spring, I actually started to think about it, and I realized that because I've been writing dystopian for so long, it's always raining and cold. And I realized that as I was starting book 4, I literally counted the months so that I would skip all the warm weather until it was sweater weather again. And I'm not sure why. I just think people in dystopian landscapes should probably be wearing a sweater. Maybe it's the mom in me. I really don't know. But yeah, so I'm the dystopian element in your spring romance panel. Thank you.
That's perfectly okay. And I'm Gail Z. Martin, and Morgan Brice. As Gail, I write epic fantasy, urban fantasy, steampunk, and more. And as Morgan Brice, I write urban fantasy, male paranormal romance. And the 2 I've got coming out actually are both set in the fall, so I can't even claim that they're spring. But one of them is Gruff. It's part of the Fables Retold collection that is 6 authors and 1,400 pages of fairy tales retold as male romance. And that is coming out at the end of April. My story, Gruff, is a retelling of the 3 billy goats Gruff, with a boar goat and a Tennessee fainting goat who fall very much in love, but need to overcome 3 Fey champions. So we have Krampus, Perkta, and Baphomet in a love story, as one does.
So obvious. I mean,
it
why
is.
did anybody think of this?
Done. Yes. The horned gods, they're horned goats. And then the other is Haven, which is the 12th in the Magic Emporium series, where a strange magic shop shows up with the thing you are in dire need of. You can only go there once, and you may not know you're in dire need when it shows up for you. And that book, Haven, comes out April 8th, and it is also set in my Fox Hollow world. So lots of good stuff coming up. Well, folks, when did you know that you wanted to write romance, and kind of what pushed you in that direction? And let's go around the other direction. Start with Tere.
I love this question because it really makes me think back. I've always been a romantic at heart. And so I always look for that element in my stories. I liked a good love song when I was 5 or 6. But I read Palomino by Danielle Steele. I bought it with my babysitting money at a somebody's garage sale. And that was it. Like, that was, no matter what else I tried to write, and I've tried different genres, there's always a romantic element. So 9, 10. I am a person who I'll read anything, but if there's romance in it, it's definitely like ups it for me. And so when I write, it just naturally happens. There's just naturally some sort of spark romance relationship at some point in the story. So super early, like super early.
Cool. Gini?
I just think romance is a part of life, and I resent every book that tries to make it not a part of life. And I always have. Even in Sherlock Holmes, Watson is romancing one of their clients and gets married. I mean, even Conan Doyle with, the most, logical, analytical main character, his supporting character gets to have this romantic love life. And I just never could understand why anyone would not include an aspect of that. So, coming in, no matter what I do, 75% of what I write comes out science fiction. I don't intend it to. I will start with an idea that it's going to be something else, and somehow, whomp, there it is, science fiction. And, when you're a woman writing science fiction and you've got romance, that instantaneously moves you, in most people's minds into soft science fiction, which I'm fine with, because I don't really want to read about how they put the rocket ship together. I just wanted to get the characters where they need to go. So, but I just, there's just certain things that I almost can't help it. Even when I write horror as J.C. Koch. There's romance in my horror. In one of my favorite horror stories that I've written, the monster gets the girl because the monster is actually the good person and saves the damsel from the handsome, terrible person. So it comes in naturally. I just think it's a part of life, and I don't know why anyone would try to shove it to the side. It doesn't have to be your whole plot point, but I just can't understand why people don't expect that in everything they read.
Makes sense to me. Victoria Sue?
I think this actually goes back to when I was younger. I remember it was like the UK version of middle school, which would be between 9 and 13 age. We didn't have a huge amount of money, so buying books was a luxury, and I was all about the library. And I discovered Mills and Boon, which is the UK old equivalent of Harlequin. Oh. And I used to take my little library ticket and go on a Friday straight after school, and the maximum number of books I could get was 12. By Sunday, I would be read all those 12 books and wanted another load to get me through the week. And so I've been hooked on romance since I was a kid, basically. Or the happy ever after. I think going back to why I started writing, various reasons, but there was one point in my recent history where I got a Kindle, and I discovered all sorts of romance on there, and I'd been waiting for the last in the series, and I was really disappointed by this book. Obviously, as authors, we all know that every reader has their own idea about how a book should be written, and I did the classic, this is wrong, she didn't do this, blah, 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 blah. The guy didn't get the girl at that point that I really wanted him to get, and he went in a completely different direction. And I went on and on about this to my entire family until they were sick of hearing from me. In the end, my husband turned around to me and he said, well, go on, write your own then. And I'm like, right, I will do. And that was 6 years ago, and a year later I got my first book published. So I'm not saying it was all that, but it was pretty much stubbornness and annoyance and thinking that I could very immaturely that I could do better.
Makes sense to me.
Yeah,
Amy?
Well, like Sue, I was at my library every month when all of those romance books came out. The Harlequin, the Silhouette, right? They would come out in 4s. And the thing is that my library called my father when I tried to check out Judy Blume's Forever, because everybody made such a big deal of the sex in it.
Mhm.
Okay, and there's nothing like telling your father in the 6th grade, I don't know, I thought it was like every other Judy Blume book. No, I did not. I knew that there was sex in it. I wanted to read the sex. But
Don't
they
we
would
all?
let you check out the Harlequin romance.
Sixth grade from,
Yeah.
sorry, UK version. What sixth grade? How old were you?
I was 6th grade. I guess I was 11, 12. That's all.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, makes total sense. That's fine.
Yeah. But they would let us check out the Harlequin romance. And so I read
Well,
those. And the other thing, and this is perfect about the Harlequin romance, is that you know, my parents didn't think reading was really an important use of my time. They wanted me to be outside. I was kind of a chubby kid, and they wanted to be out being not chubby. And so I would get my big English and history anthologies. And I did this up when I was still living with my parents and going to college. And I would slide the little Harlequin romance in front of it, and they couldn't tell what I was reading. And you couldn't do that with the really thick fantasy books, right? You had to, you know, those just didn't fit. People could figure out what you were doing, but you could do that with the romance books. So that also facilitated it. So I knew I liked to read it, but as a writer, I didn't know that's what I was going to write. And I mean, I wrote a couple of Harlequin style romances right after my son was born. I lost my job. He cried an awful lot. He had some disabilities and that we didn't know about. And we kept going through babysitters. So I lost my job and I became a stay-at-home mom of a special needs toddler. And because I wasn't bringing in income, we had to move to a house in the middle of nowhere. So I was all by myself with a special needs toddler, and I was the only one I knew that could talk. So I was telling my own stories on the computer, and they turned out to be romance. And I thought, well, I'm going to try and graduate beyond that, and I'm going to do something paranormal. And my elf and my vampire were banging, and that was just it. It was like, okay, you brought on an elf, you brought on a vampire, they're banging. I think it's gonna be romance. I don't see that there's a way out of this. So
Love that. How about you, Nina?
Wow. Well, I have to confess, I became interested in romance because I was a snoop. My older sister used to read romance novels. And so when I was 12, 13 years old, I would go into her room and, you know, put the folded laundry away, and I found these Harlequin romance books. And so I would read them. But the catch was, because she was in college, so she would go to classes and then she would go to work. And so she'd get home around 5 o'clock. So I would have to read the books or try to read as much of the book as possible before she walked in the door. And sometimes, I mean, her key would literally be jangling in the door and I would be swiping through, you know, trying to get to the last paragraph so I could figure out, you know, oh, what was happening. And then I'd sneak back in her room and put the book back. And so I would have to imagine for the rest of the day what happened in the book. And so that kind of put my, you know, mind in, I guess, storytelling mode. So fast forward about, I guess maybe a little over 10 years ago, I was doing something completely different than writing romance. And I'm sitting in a meeting with my business manager, and she realized, you know, she was talking to me that I had lost interest in running my company. And so she just kind of asked, not expecting the answer, well, if you weren't doing this, what would you be doing? Because I put so much effort into, you know, that profession. And I just kind of laughed and said, I'd be writing romance. And I was laughing, not because I thought it was funny, but because it made me happy when I thought about it. And she could hear that in my voice. And so she questioned a bit further. And I told her, you know, about my history of snooping in my sister's bedroom to find her books. And she asked just a very straight up question, why aren't you doing that? And I didn't have a good answer. So the next week I started writing. And, fast forward, I got my first offer with Entangled Publishing, writing Brazens, and I just absolutely loved it. And I liked writing, hot sex. I didn't realize that until I turned in my manuscript, and I'm thinking, oh, it's gonna, go here. And they're like, no, that's definitely a Brazen. This is where it belongs. And so I've been doing it ever since. And it just is kind of funny that, and just a nice kind of, I guess you could say, bonus that now I'm writing for Harlequin, which is not something that I ever expected.
Cool. Shaila?
So that question, there are lots of panels that this version or some version of this question comes up, and it's funny because it's almost like I've in hindsight pieced together my childhood all the way up to some of the more recent moments that kind of made things click and made me start writing romance. But I guess if you go really far back to my childhood, one of the things I write in my bio on my website, or if, depending on how long the bio needs to be, I might talk about my childhood. And I say, well, I'm an unabashed lover of happily ever afters, right? Every TV show I watched when I was growing up, there would always be if there was any kind of romance or whatever, I would always watch that show till they got together. After that, lost interest, right? And that's kind of one of those cardinal rules that if the two main characters get together, then that's really pretty much it, because that's what people really were watching the show for, right? Mm-hmm. I would read my little the golden books, right? You'd have Cinderella or some of those other fairy tales like you were mentioning, Gail, and I would get to the end of Cinderella, especially because I think that was the one I read the most. And on the very last page, there would be, some kind of the end. And I would get so mad because I wanted to know what happened next, right? I would imagine all these things and I would be like, why is there not another page? And I would be so angry and so upset and so, so mad. And I never really thought, I could write one day. Definitely not romance. My mother didn't read romance, so we didn't have any of that in the house. I didn't have any friends who had those books in the house. It wasn't until high school that a friend gave me a copy of Romancing the Stone. And I, read that sucker cover to cover, like in 2 days, the mass market, thing. And of course, my mom, very conservative, so she was like, what is this? Because there's, she's on the cover with her sleeves down, and she's like this, and there's this guy in her, bosom, and I was like, oh, well, the main character, she is a romance author. This isn't a romance though, but this is a cover of the cover in her book, and I don't know if she bought it. To this day, I'm still afraid to ask her. I'm still like, Mommy, can I ask you a question? I don't really feel like asking her because I'd be terrified. She would be like, I knew you were lying to me. So, but anyway, that was my first romance book. And even then, it wasn't like I thought, oh, I'm going to write romance. But what it did do was, girls, it really jump-started my fantasies. Here you are, a girl entering puberty, and now you have this outlet for your imagination and a language that up until this point I did not know. Since my parents came from India my dad was here like in the 60s, and my mom, he went back to India, met my mom like within 2 weeks, got married. That classic arranged marriage, very sheltered upbringing. So that's kind of how I was brought up too. And so I really didn't have a kind of a social sexual education of any sort coming from home. So I feel like if I had read more romance books, I probably would have known a little bit more going into college. Not that I didn't teach myself, but I had to learn the hard way about things. But the thing is that, like I said, it did jumpstart my imagination. And, so in the evenings, as I'm dreaming about these, dreamy guys and how I would want to fall in love or meet the special someone, I would always have some sort of fictional, situation, like some guy had to run away and I just happened to be in his car or on his plane or whatever, right? And it's a spy story and we're running through Paris and I'm falling in love with this guy, or it's some kind of vampires or something like that I had absolutely no basis for except for what I watched on television, right? my parents would watch Bollywood movies, and pretty much every Bollywood movie back then, actually, I wouldn't even say practically, I would say all of the Bollywood movies back then were romances. And so it's kind of funny that in a culture that was so repressed, in some sense, right? When you talk about sex, right? Romance, no, but just the actual talking about sex, teaching sex, teaching. My mother was one of those that thought you got pregnant by holding a boy's hand, right? So,
Oh my God.
so here I am watching all these happily ever afters on these Bollywood movies. So looking back, I realized I was very, very much a romantic, right? I kind of had that optimism that the first guy you fall in love with is going to be the guy you marry, and he's going to sweep you off your feet, and all that lovely stuff. But the fantasies that I had, I pretty much put that aside, right? You go to college, you're grown up. I'm not going to think about that kind of stuff now. Blah blah blah. I'm actually dating now, so whatever. I've got more important things to think about. Or I did in high school, my senior AP Lit class, I did want to be an author. But of course, here you're reading all these classics, and I thought I wanted to be the next great American author, the novelist that writes literary fiction, right? Short stories or classic novels that are going to be taught in school. So all that kind of storytelling experience I had in my mind as I was going through those 4 years of high school, I just ignored it. And I started writing. Obviously, I actually ended up being a pharmacist. So my parents would not let me get an English degree. They thought it would be useless. And being a writer was like, no, you won't make any money, right? So I had to be a pharmacist, but I chose pharmacy. And I did have a pretty, what I call a 50-50 brain, just as creative as I am logical and science math minded. So I did that, and I wrote on the side. And like Terry was saying, everything I wrote either veered towards romance without me even realizing it, or it didn't have romance and I just hated it. Like I could never write a full novel because nothing sparked my passion or interest. And then come 2012, my babysitter at the time, she forced me to read the Twilight series. And the funny thing is, I read, here I am for decades. I'm reading all this, hoity-toity literary fiction stuff that's on the New York Times bestseller. And I guarantee you, I think I finished 2 of those books, like all the ones that I bought and read that like are all on my book shelves. I don't think I've ever finished any one of those books because there was nothing that made me care about reading till the end of that story. And so here I am, 4 books in 2 weeks I read. I was shocked with myself because I had not ever, finished a book that wasn't commercial fiction. And so I was kind of like, wait a minute, these are kind of like the stories I used to have in my head, in high school. Like, what's wrong with this? Like if she could be successful doing this, maybe I ought to not write about these weird characters. I enjoyed writing about the weird characters, but I think I enjoyed thinking them up more than writing, for literary fiction stuff. And so I thought, let's try something just for fun. So January 2013, I started writing Soulmated, and 6 months later, I had 2 books, and I had never written that much more, but I was so much happier. I was like dreaming about my characters, and I couldn't wait to talk about them to anybody who would listen. I'm sorry, everybody, but but that was the start, and that's when I realized, I'm like, duh. Like when I look back at my life, I'm like, I was a classic HEA fan from the beginning. I just never knew it. Didn't have any guidance in any of that, because obviously literary fiction people, the minute you say, oh, are they getting, I'd be in like writing groups and little critique groups and stuff, and they'd be like, are they gonna kiss? Because this isn't that type of writing group.
No.
And I would be like, okay, and I would leave that part out or whatever. A lot of times, like in these smaller groups, you have to come there with 4 pages or 8 pages or whatever. And there was one woman who wrote romance, and I even talk about biases. I was like, oh, I don't know if I really want to read her stuff because, romance. And that was kind of stupid, right? I devoured, it was much later that I devoured Twilight, but I really enjoyed Romancing the Stone. Like I said, that book I was just absorbed in that book. And I'm actually friends still friends with that friend that gave me that book. We ended up kind of meeting up on Facebook years later, and she read the trilogy and everything. And so it was kind of neat to kind of come full circle with that. But yeah, romance, a lot of people, that stigma against it is just, it boggles my
There's
mind.
a huge stigma.
Yeah.
There is a huge stigma, and it keeps getting reinforced. As a science fiction author who writes a lot of romance, there was this big push when Touched by an Alien, which is the first book in my main series, came out, and it was like, oh, get it as SFR, and I'm like, no, I want it to be science fiction with romance in it, because more people will read it. And I talk about this when I do signings and when I do panels, and I can always tell the booksellers and librarians in the room, because when I say what I'm about to say now, their heads start bobbing, which is that everybody, science fiction readers, horror, paranormal, mystery, whatever, every other section to them has cooties. They just want their section. Yeah. But a romance reader will read anything. If you write an economics textbook and put a romance in it, and you get a romance reader to read it, and they like it, they're going to tell everybody, and all of a sudden your economics textbook is going to be starting to shelve on the romance shelves. So you want I'm always cross genre. I almost never write a straight genre per se. I always want it shelving on the other genre, because the romance readers will find it, but the other readers will never go. That section has cooties, and they might get on them, and it's silly, but that's really how it is. And as long as you're in their section, they can handle your romance. So it's
I agree, Ginny. I've seen that too. And in the epic and urban fantasy that I write as Gail, it's probably only 2 or 3% of the book that is romance, but people can't kick bad guys' butts all the time. There has to be some downtime. In that downtime, you need relationships. I mean, you can't just go around being a badass, by yourself. And I found that I really enjoyed writing the romance piece as much as I enjoyed writing the paranormal piece and the fight scenes, and got thinking, well, wouldn't it be fun to write a book where it's at least half and half, where the romance is a major part? And I tend to write a lot of established couples, because falling in love with somebody is the easy part. Staying in love with them and staying with them, especially when you're hunting vampires and werewolves and all that, it gets difficult. And so, I agree completely. Romance readers will read some of everything, but other genre readers kind of go for that one section of the bookshelf, and that's where they stay. Absolutely.
You guys want to hear something that curl your toes or curl your hair or tick you off? No, I walked into a local used bookstore, and they had divided their romantic suspense. Their romantic suspense, that was what they called it, romantic suspense, by male and female authors.
Wow.
Right?
Okay.
Oh, I'd have been burning that place to the ground. Oh, wait, was that my out loud voice?
Yeah, no,
I would have complained to the manager.
Furious. And I felt bad, because there were like these two high school, college age kids behind the counter, and I was this close to going, "Arr!" But it was like, oh my God, what is wrong with this? What is wrong with the idea of, two people finding love in the middle of all the bodies? I mean, seriously.
Yeah. Well, and anytime it's a male, anytime it's like somebody starts going by gender of author, you run into issues on that. And I'm on the side, I think all of us need to get published, right? But I don't think you should only buy male authors. I don't think you should only buy female authors. I think you should buy a mix, and I think you should buy kind of everybody in that sense. Try everyone, see who you like best, regardless of the byline, so I would have lost my mind. I don't know how you
besides that, everybody writes under pen names, so just because it's a male name doesn't mean it's actually a guy or a girl. I mean, we all make these things up. So yeah, oh, thought I would have been take two. Well, folks, we are almost at the end of our hour. Believe it or not, this has been so much fun. So I want to go around real quick and have everybody let the viewers know where they can find you online, and let us know what your upcoming, most recent, or soon-to-be book is. And Terry, let's start with you.
Well, you can find me on Facebook. I'm the Tere Michaels who does not live in Virginia and does not have dogs. That's the easiest way to know that you've found the correct person. But I'm also on Instagram and my website, teremichaels.com. As I said, my third book in my dystopian series just came out. The fourth book is being written as we speak. And I don't know, it's a long story, but I have a big ambitious writing plan for the rest of the year that it's a lot. So follow me on those things, because I might have updates of the creative process, both the good, the bad, and the ugly. But yeah.
Victoria Sue?
The best place to find me is usually on Facebook. And my group, Victoria Sue's Crew, or generally, but I am on, I've got victoriasue.com, and I am a little bit on Instagram, but I haven't quite worked out how to use that yet, so I'm kind of still Facebook. I'm starting something new at the moment, but I have just finished my Guardians of Camelot paranormal action adventure series, which, as I briefly mentioned before, is the Knights of the Round Table being made immortal and fighting Morgana Zevil in current day New York. So that's fun. That's just completed. So.
And where do we sign up for your newsletter, which is fantastic? Sue, where's your newsletter? Tell us where we sign up for your newsletter, because she's got a great newsletter, guys. I can't let her get away with not telling us where to sign up for the newsletter.
Yeah, the links are on my website and also on my Facebook page.
Okay.
And
awesome.
It's Bailey's week next week, if you read it. My dog takes over the newsletter every 4 or 5 weeks, and his week next week. So he likes to recommend other dog novels.
Oh, don't tell my Maltese that he could write a newsletter on their back.
Just leave him to it. So,
Gini?
Let's see. For anybody who is keeping track at home, editor, I am working on the rewrite for book 17, Aliens Like Us. I swear to God, that'll be finished in all of our lifetimes. And I have short stories coming out in a variety of anthologies this year with me. Most of them are me writing as Anita Ensall. Derelict from Zombie Needs Brains is coming in July. I mentioned The Reinvented Heart, that's coming out later in the year. Showdown at Europa Station. I have, Gunfight at Europa Station from Bain, also coming out later this year. And all of those have short stories for me, like I said, set in my Belters universe. So there's romance in all of them. And I have a variety of other things that I'm so late on, and I'm working on everything. So yes, I swear, they're all
and where do
dorming.
we find you?
Oh, thank you. My website, www.ginikoch.com. I'm on Facebook. I have as me and 2 Facebook fan pages, Hairspray and Rock and Roll and author Gini Koch. I'm also on Twitter. There are 2 Gini Koches on Twitter. I'm the one without a space, but if you hit the other one, she's totally cool and will tell you that you're at the wrong place. You can tell us apart because she speaks German and English fluently, and I speak English and sarcasm. So it's a real clear program, but I have no idea what I'm doing with it, and I gave up. So I'm there, but I'm not. And Pinterest. I'm actually active on Pinterest because I understand that.
Awesome. Amy?
So you can find me on Facebook. I have a group, Amy Lane Anonymous. We post funky little memes and knitting, and
it's a really fun group. I'm part of it. It's a really fun group.
Well, I love it when you show up, because every now and then, like, Gini will comment and I'm like, I know her.
We had dinner together at Jess's
Yes, we
project.
But so Amy Lane Anonymous, which is just mostly all fun. My website is amylaneromance.com, and that's just keeping up on current events and the occasional blog post. And let's see, where else? Oh, I have an IG account that's Amy HEA Lane. I had to change it because someone hacked it, and so HEA Lane is really awkward, but that's what I had. And I have a Patreon that's pretty much the same. You have to look up Amy's HEA Lane, or Patreon denies my existence because I admitted that there are sexy things on my Patreon. It doesn't admit I exist. Girl. Yeah. And I have, like, that's a mix of like free stuff and stuff that you have to pay for. So there's enough free stuff to make it worthwhile. Cool. And let's see, I'm on Twitter, but not often. And usually that's Twitter is where I get bitter. So just stay away from me on Twitter.
Instantly racist to Twitter to read Amy's bitter posts.
That's right. Yeah, no, I don't like myself on Twitter, so I try to stay off of it.
How about you, Nina?
I don't like many people on Twitter, so that's why I don't go on there much.
There's very, very good reasons to stay away from Twitter, but no, and I have a newsletter. It's not nearly as cool as Sue's. You can sign up for that on my website, amylaneromance.com.
Nice, cool. Nina?
All right. Well, you can find me at ninacrespo.com. All of my social media places are there. The best place to find me is on Instagram. I love Instagram, so you'll find all kinds of pictures and what's going on in life for me. Also, my personal Facebook page, that's another place where I'm usually posting stuff that's going on. And my newsletter, that's the best place to keep up with what's coming next as far as books and series are concerned. As I mentioned earlier, the last book that came out in February is part of the Tilbridge series. That trilogy is complete. So I know sometimes readers like the complete series. So the Tilbridge series trilogy is the one to jump into. African-American cowgirls and cowboys, family saga drama. If you like your stuff a little soapy and messy, go ahead and pick that up. The Fortunes of Texas series and the Hotel Fortune. It's a multi-author series. My book is book 5, but all of the books are standalone. There is a small mystery that encompasses all 6 books. But as far as reading, book 5, An Officer and a Fortune on its own, it will not take away from the happiness HEA factor of this couple. There's a lot of food in the book, so hey, either show up hungry or don't show up hungry, because it's a story between a chef and an officer, as the title points out, An Officer and a Fortune. So yeah, definitely come check out my website, check me out on Instagram. I'd love to connect with everybody.
Add me at food.
Cool.
Yeah.
Good stuff. Shaila?
So you can find me on www.shailapatelauthor.com. And I don't have a book coming out anytime soon, but on my website, you can actually find all my social media links, everything from Twitter, Pinterest, Instagram, Facebook, even Goodreads. But yeah, you'll stay tuned for some news, hopefully soon. I do have a story that I'm hoping will go on sub soon. My agent has it right now. I'm excited about it. It's in young adult, thrillers are really big right now, and a lot of the thrillers, we were talking about the whole stigma with romance. Well, most young adult books are never marketed as romance. I mean, unless it's so clear that that's the only thing going on in the book. But all these big hits that you hear about, a lot of them have romance. All those fantasy books you have, a lot of them have romance in it, but you'll never see them in a romance category. You'll just see them as young adult. And so for a while there, we kind of had to stop working on my YA romantic suspense, because it's clearly romance, and it was clearly romantic suspense, or at least it is now. I tried to tone back the romance because my agent was saying the market was kind of soft, and then it just kind of rebounded and it picked back up again. So we made some tweaks to the story, and hopefully, like I said, she's got it now. But it's basically a Carolina country boy who meets an Indian doctor's daughter, kind of falls for her, and then finds out when he's trying to avenge his brother's death that her dad was one of the main players in responsible for his brother's death. So it's an interesting story, just because I love juxtapositions. So he's part of he has to infiltrate a biker gang. So we've got a young adult biker gang book or biker club book, which is not very many out there. Actually, there's only probably one author who writes that, one traditionally published author who writes that, and that's Katie McGarry. She's got a great one. But she, when I read that, it was after I'd started the book, and I was so excited because I was thinking, what publisher is going to want to read a book, that's got a teen protagonist that's in a, trying to infiltrate a biker club. So I'm like, I wrote one, but yeah, so I'm excited about that story. So if you're interested in that kind of stuff, definitely follow me online. And I'm not a newsletter person. I do have a newsletter. You're welcome to sign up for it. You might get one in a year. I promise you will forget about me and then go, what is this Shaila Patel?
Who is this person? Yeah.
Yeah. And I know all the stuff you're supposed to do, keep them engaged and give them this interesting stuff. And no, not my thing. So, but I am on Facebook quite a bit. Instagram I pick up, and then like what happens, I'll go through this whole period of, Instagram, and then I'll drop that, and then it'll be Twitter, and then, back to Facebook. And so, yeah, you'll catch me in one of those places for sure.
Sounds good. And of course, you can find me at gailzmartin.com or morganbrice.com. My reader groups are Worlds of Morgan Brice and Shadow Alliance, where you can find all the rest of my social media links and my newsletter links. Just put in the names, you'll find me on pretty much everywhere. And of course, most of the time, I'm here on Continual. So thank you all so much for being with us and talking about romance and spring and all of those good things. And thank all of you for watching and listening. There'll be more romance here on Continual, so we'll see you online.